let's get started with this week's Bible study. And we are starting a little bit of a new unit. One thing I wanted to point out is that Pastor Andy has been discussing Psalms in his Wednesday night topics. So if anybody wants to go back and catch some of those, I've really enjoyed those discussions. And today our new Bible study topic actually happens to be talking about one of the Psalms as well, Psalm 24. And I don't know about you guys, but Psalm 24 comes right after Psalm 23, which tons of people have memorized. Yeah, and I thought, but it said Psalm 24, and I kind of had that I don't even know what it's about, which is funny. So I was actually excited to look at Psalm 24 today because definitely not emblazoned or whatever the word is on my brain like Psalm 23 is. So
there's a bunch of them.
Yeah, there's a lot more than the 23rd, right? Yeah. Okay. Well, and since you're speaking, Sharon, will you introduce yourself, please?
I'm Sharon McGinley. I work in the music department at the University of the Cumberlands. I'm in my dress black because I'm getting ready to record something.
Yep. Big recital today.
And I'm Lauren Wiedemer. I also work in the music department at University of the Cumberlands and with undergraduate students as well.
Yeah, I thought this was fun. Us music gals could get together today, and I appreciate both of you for being here and for our discussion. And for everybody that is joining us, we're just starting another little unit from the Bible study lesson materials that we use at FBC. And this week, the topic that we're going to look at, like I said, is Psalm 24, starting kind of a new unit of thought. We have been looking at a bunch of the parables of Jesus that were found in the book of Luke. But now we're looking at a topic for the next few weeks, kind of about tithing, but it was really this general broad idea of good stewardship, which is really what the psalm introduces right away. And I think we'll just jump into it. But before we actually read the verse, I'm going to ask the two of you and everybody who's listening, when you think of the term stewardship, I just looked up a really sterile definition, and it said basically the idea of taking care of somebody else's stuff, somebody else's property, somebody else's land, for example. That would be stewardship. But in the sense that we're going to look at today, what do you guys think of? We throw that around a lot in Christianity, I think, be a good steward. What are we saying?
I think of it a lot in terms of, the earth, our natural world. This is God's world that he created, and we're supposed to be stewards and take care of it.
Yep. And when you read those verses in a minute, that's exactly what these verses, I think, highlight for us right away. Anything else? What do you guys think of when people say, be a good steward?
I think a lot about time, being a good steward of my time and, not wasting it away on social media or doing things maybe I shouldn't be doing when I can do other things that either help further the kingdom of God or helping take care of somebody else or do different things. So time's a big one for me. And then also thinking about, we'll read the first two verses, but thinking about also God created me. And so taking care of my body and being a good steward of the body that he has given me as well. So that means, not maybe eating ice cream as much as I want and eating a salad every once in a while and exercising. So that's what I think of.
Yeah, I absolutely think of all those things. And I think those are common themes that come to all of us. And, we're given a lot of things, jobs and families and children and friendship. And there are actually a lot of things we are given. And when you stop and think of it, sometimes you have those days and you think, oh, I don't have anything. Somebody else has so much more than I do. But when we look at these verses, I think that it's going to be apparent that God gave us everything. One of the comments that is pointed out in our study guide, and it really struck me, and I want us to think about it as we read these next few verses. The author suggested that when we enter God's presence, or kind of our responsibility is that what we are literally becomes our gift back to him. That's kind of our tithe in this very big picture way. And so we're going to talk a little bit also about the concept of truthfulness and what that means, how just being truthful in our approach when we go back to God and be in his presence, what that looks like. So we're in Psalm 24, and I asked Sharon to read verses 1 and 2 so we can kick off the discussion.
The Lord is, or the earth is the Lord's, and all that is in it, the world and those who live in it. For he has founded it on the seas and established it on the rivers.
Yeah, it was interesting coming right after Psalm 23. The last verse in Psalm 23, we all know, is I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And what is the house of the Lord? Well, also we have to remember that at this time, the Ark of the Covenant was the essence or the presence of God. And so that's the holy place. And the author helped us understand, and I went and read back about this a lot. I didn't know much about this psalm. And that, it's kind of this idea of being in the actual presence of the Lord, which in the time of David, this psalm was attributed to him, was the ark. Who can stand in the presence of the Lord? But Sharon just said that the earth is the Lord's, everything in it. So with that concept of stewardship, if we're the humans dwelling in that space that he created, what is our responsibility? So one of the first questions that we kind of want to consider today is, if the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, and I think yours said founded it upon the seas and established it upon the waters, literally they're covering everything, right? All the dirt and the water that makes up the earth. What is good stewardship then? What do you think that looks like for a Christian if we believe, understand, accept that God is the creator of just that most essential gift, the world? What is our responsibility? What do you guys think?
That's very complicated because it gets into an arena that a lot of people have made political. So it's we could talk all day about that. But yeah, I think it means not throwing out trash is an obvious one. Thinking about the resources that you use and how they will negatively impact the earth and plants and animals.
Yeah.
Because that goes to other life forms, and it also goes back into our own food sources and how it's going to affect us and our bodies.
Absolutely. Yep. I went hiking a few weeks ago, and I posted some pictures on their social media that Lauren already alluded to. But yeah, but while I was out that day, it really just struck me that, there are often times you walk outside and you just think, oh, I'm so thankful, the sun shines, or, just a tree strikes you beautifully, or a little weed growing in a crack, you think, and I think we all know, and we have that as part of our being, our connection to, God's creation. But I think, as Sharon already just pointed out, it's easy to take it for granted sometimes and to forget our responsibility. Maybe not even intentionally. We have so much stuff. I had to look at these two verses and realize it didn't say anything about all of the materialistic things. It said God created the world and the water. So does that ever strike you? Because sometimes I think being a good steward, I think, oh my goodness, I gotta take good care of my house and pay my bills on time, and those are part of it.
Yeah, my translation says the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof.
Mm-hmm.
And so the word fullness kind of struck me. And I think, like, when I think of fullness, I guess I think of, like, yes, the physical earth,
Mm-hmm.
Which God created everything, so he has the right to everything and owns everything, and he has given us life to help take care of it. But I also think that applies to, like, worship as well, like thinking of just having, like, a full life. Worship is part of that. So I don't know, like, in terms of stewardship, like worshiping God, like you said, like going on a hike and appreciating God's creation and worshiping him using in that way. I know a lot of people can feel God and experience God in nature. So that was just something I thought of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, that you don't have to construct a worshipful experience. You can just be struck by it sometimes.
That's a great point. Actually, it may be just being a steward of our awareness. You know, if I'm aware of that, being a good steward of recognize that, and just like Sharon just said, just stop and pause and be a good steward of that awareness that he's given me. Wow. Let me take this moment to really thank you, God, because kind of the next part of the question is, this is a gift, or these are things God has entrusted us with, and we are stewards of it at the moment. And so what is the appropriate response when someone gives you something? What are we supposed to be?
Thankful.
Yeah, you appreciate it.
Right. And you can show that appreciation in a lot of ways. I mean, some people, you know, I like to give gifts. I think that's just as fun as getting them. But sometimes when you give gifts, so people appreciate it in different ways. Sometimes you just can see it on their face, or maybe that relationship is a little stronger, or sometimes they like to give you something back. Or sometimes you've been able to maybe contribute, you know, a way to help them be happier or just enjoy something. And I think that, you know, the big title of our unit was called God's Good Gifts. And I think just these two verses are outlining for it that really all of God's creation. I did look in a little bit of just another commentary just said that these verses are kind of built in the same language that would have been about, you know, constructing a city or something new. And so that God constructed this thing for us, specifically for us, a gift intended for you and for, you know, for everybody listening and thinking about it today. So that was kind of neat. Okay, well, I think we could talk about that for a long time, because really God's gifts allow us to just, you know, pretty much enable everything we are able to do and know and interact with. But the kind of the main point of the lesson, though, is coming up. Lauren, will you read verses 3-6?
Yeah. Who shall ascend the hill of the Lord, and who shall stand in his holy place? He who has clean hands and a pure heart, and who does not lift up his soul to what is false, and does not swear deceitfully. He will receive blessing from the Lord and righteousness from the God of his salvation. Such is the generation of those who seek him and who seek the face of the God of Jacob.
Yeah. This is, I think, a question that we probably ask ourselves often. So verse 1 and 2 is saying, here's what God has created. He's the creator and he's made this thing. And these next few verses, it was explained in some things that I read that kind of is maybe like it would be in a lesson type instruction. The people are saying, okay, here's God's presence. Well, who's allowed to go be in that presence? What do I have to do to be in that presence? You know, and the godly answer, maybe the priest or whatever is responding by saying, well, those with clean hands, you know, it's this idea of if you have clean hands and a pure heart, somebody who doesn't lift their soul up to an idol, someone who doesn't swear by what is false, that's the person who's going to receive the blessing from the Lord. That's the person who can stand in the presence of the ark or whatever that holy space is. Now, we know this predates Christ, and we have been offered, you know, that opportunity to enter into a relationship with Christ, who allowed our sins to be forgiven, and we can be in communion or in relationship with God that way. But this idea of clean hands and a pure heart, I think it's still applicable today. It's the author asks us to consider the concept of truthfulness, because he said, who may ascend the hill of the Lord? Who can stand in his holy place? This person who is not swearing by falsehood, the person who can go with a pure heart, truthfulness. How do you think the concept of truthfulness, or just knowing the truth and standing before God with truthfulness, is being, I guess, presented here? And how might that be applicable to us in, you know, today's approach?
Well, I think, you know, clean hands and pure heart, just doing everything with good intention, and living within the instructions that God gives us. Because I know sometimes it's easy for me to get frustrated and want to maybe say things that I shouldn't to somebody. And so, just taking a step back and, cheesy as it is, like, what would Jesus do? And Jesus would step away and take a moment and calm down and then come back and reevaluate the situation so I can approach that with, a pure intention and pure action rather than from like whatever anger and frustration that stirs up inside of me.
You get angry and frustrated sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah. Sharon, do you ever get
angry?
Okay.
Oh,
I guess it's just Lauren then. Nobody else out there. Right.
Sorry, Lauren.
Yeah, no.
But you're right, because the humanness of us, and our lesson kind of suggested that, we have a very hierarchical, legalistic interpretation of who gets to stand in the presence of God sometimes. Even when we don't mean to, just our constructs from when we're small, the way we're raised and our cultural and social perceptions, sometimes we define who is truthful, who has clean hands and pure heart. And I think what you're suggesting is that it's just that purest of heart, that pure intention, that, and truth, Jesus is the way, the truth, right? And so really having this Christ-like approach, trying to live with a Christ-like attitude. I don't know.
I think, I was going to say, I think there's some importance in realizing that you don't have to be in a specific place right now to be worthy to talk to God and be in his presence. That having the good intentions, and when I say good intentions, I mean that honesty, that bareness. You might moment by moment not be in a good place of honesty or in dealing well with others, but you have to be able to be raw in that moment before God and just say, this is what I am, and I'm really trying, and meet me where I am. And that's the honesty I have found that I find necessary for me.
Yes. The author said something about, you pointed it out before we started too, that, these people, when this was written, the 10 Commandments are guiding much of, the way people are approaching their relationship with God. And there's a lot of legalistic practices. And thank goodness that, I can't even remember my passcode to get to Zoom today. So if I had to remember a lot of rules and laws, I would have been struggling. But Sharon just said so nicely that it's being raw. It's where you are at that moment. And one thing we've talked a lot about in this Bible study series, I just like to remember, for me personally, and for everybody to remind what Sharon just said, our relationship, our ability to be in God's presence is a consistently growing and changing way. We're all growing and moving, hopefully, toward God, and draw near to God, and he'll draw near to you. And I think that that's really important advice.
And the author writes here, these requirements are, rather than rules, confessions that invite personal reflection.
Right. Absolutely. Because I don't know about you, but when if you're given something, you're being a good steward about it, and you might stick it in your pocket, take care of it. But when you stop and you think, the owner's coming back for it, okay, is it in really good condition? I don't want any dust on it. I want to make sure, but also the whole idea that I got to keep that whole time, and I did my best. Maybe I had to go to work with that person's money in my pocket, or maybe I had to work in the garden with that person's money in my pocket, or take care of my kids. But the idea is that I'm taking the best care of it I can in whatever situation I'm in. But when I get to stand before that person, to reflect on that and give that offering or be a good steward, I want to just be the best I can at the moment.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I was reading I think this, like you said, like Psalm 23, everybody knows. And then you get to Psalm 24 and it's like, I don't remember this one, And so I was reading some different translations, and the Message, this translates this as, who can climb the mountain of God. Like, who can scale? They actually say the north face.
Okay.
It says, you know, we can't by ourselves, but God can. God helps us. And so just to that point that you were making, like, and you know, we do need to come to God with this like rawness and honesty, and He meets us where we're at, and He'll help us. He'll help us get there. So we're not in it alone.
Yep, absolutely. And when I think about one thing he brought up too, kind of helps me think of what you just said. Talked about when Jesus gave the Sermon on the Mount. You know, if we're looking at who it's for, Jesus said, "Blessed are the people who are meek or pure in heart." You know, he even kind of echoed this idea, and we all know he didn't say the people who have their own, you know, whatever amazing evangelical television station, or, you know, people who, you know, accomplish this many things. He really was saying he's welcoming everyone who's willing to have that, like you said, that pure heart at the moment. Just come forward with where you are. So if we get to that last idea, and I think you guys have some great input and insight about this, if what we are at any given moment is our offering or our gift to God, how does being committed to truthfulness, or that concept of truthfulness, help us in becoming a faithful steward? So if you had to help someone understand that concept, you know, what might you suggest to someone else? How can striving for truthfulness, just being honest, like you said, about where you are, how can that help us be a better steward?
Well, it helps me empathize with where other people might be and what they might need. And I might look at them through a lens of frustration, and then I think, but where am I? And what would Jesus do?
Yeah.
You know, that he would see someone who has a hurt or who has a need, and to try to be sympathetic.
Yep.
And a listener.
Yep. And I think before we started, Sharon, you said something super important. I don't know if you remember it, but you were talking about how it's not individualistic, that really our gifts and our I guess our reflection of our stewardship is also very evident, or I guess played out in our relationships. I think you touched on that. I thought that was really important. How we treat others, I guess, is what you were saying.
Yes. Yeah, I highlighted something that the author, our worthiness to be in God's holy presence is directly related to our ethics and actions towards one another. So I think it's very relevant to say that my job as a Christian is not to make sure everybody else is behaving and conforming to what I believe, but it's how do I behave towards them.
Yeah. And if you think of the whole creation being a gift to us, that means all these people and these relationships that we are given as well. You know, we're stewards of those relationships, and that's a big responsibility. Yeah. So did you have anything to add to that, Lauren? I thought maybe you were going to say something, or I'm putting you on the spot.
I don't. I think you covered it. You all covered it beautifully.
Before we close, I just wanted us to think about this last statement. The lesson was wrapped up with some "what about me" questions, and they were: truth is the key to our preparation for worship. And we just kind of talked about that, just being honest with ourselves, being honest with where we're at any given time. And, you know, I don't know about you guys, but when I want to give someone a gift, I want to wrap it up perfectly. And I only, just like on Facebook, we only show our happy pictures to the world. But real life isn't that neat and tidy. And God, you know, thankfully accepts us exactly where we are at any given time. But I want to also, as you both said at the beginning, be a good steward of those gifts. I want to take care of my body and of the earth and all the things that I'm given, so that hopefully I'm striving toward that, you know, at all times to the best of my ability. But it did remind us that truth, according to our lesson and what we're talking about, is our deepest stewardship. God is the Lord of everything, and when we finally recognize that, the way we worship Him back is our offering. And our worship is in all these things you've just said: our relationships, the way we treat these gifts, you know, how we're responsible with them. If you think of that concept of being just a vapor or this tiny little, you know, tiny little drop in the ocean or a piece of sand, you want to maximize that and make it, yeah, as valuable as you can. So anybody else have anything to add?
I just always come back to the idea that we're supposed to be conduits, almost like I'm this this space that doesn't need to be visible myself to let God come through and act. And
That's a really great picture, honestly, to think about. You know, if and I think you do that really well, by the way.
oh,
That's
thank
why
you.
yeah,
Thank you.
so many people. So you're a gift I'm thankful for. I'm going to be a good steward of that relationship, because I do think about people in my life like that do that for me, you know, and I think that sometimes we maybe underestimate um, that stewardship that we are. I think sometimes we're pretty hard on ourselves. We're our own worst critics often, but God accepts us where we're at. And so just being that for others, I think, is important. So pure hearts, clean hands, goals, life goals, right? Is that what people say?
Yeah, goals.
Yeah, goals, people, goals. Okay.
I was just thinking about, you were talking about the John 14:6 earlier, where it's I'm the way, the truth,
Yes.
the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. And I think that this relates really well to this passage. But, you know, if truth, being obedient in truthfulness is one of the, you know, the best ways that we can be stewards, then just by us being truthful with others and to ourselves, I think is one of the best ways that we can exercise that. I know I'm a person who doesn't like conflict, so sometimes I'll kind of like maybe not be as straightforward as I should, and trying to be better at that, because I think people really appreciate when you are truthful in love with them, and I know I appreciate that back. So and then my only other comment was just thinking of truthfulness is that just, I think even more than ever, we need to be seeking God's truth in these times. So.
Absolutely. Yep. And I won't, and the lesson also concluded with the last few verses 7 through 10, and it was talking about the idea of just kind of lifting up your heads, O gates, be lifted up, you ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. And it was one of the comments was just about that when God enters, or, you know, when we do enter into that presence of God, that it's kind of shouted, that people would respond. It would be this big glorious shout. And I know that when we do enter God's presence, oftentimes it does have that feeling, you know, we're able to kind of, like you said, when you go out in nature or you have a great relationship, you kind of want to be, we said you're thankful for gifts when you're given them. So that's kind of a little wrap up to the lesson. Okay, well, anything else from you, musical sisters? No, I know everybody's going about their day. Well, everybody who's listening today, we appreciate everyone who is joining us, and I hope I'm always blessed by this time. And I appreciate both of you, and I hope that someone else is blessed by it too. Thank you.
Thank you.